delighted to contribute to this seminar that has been designed to make an aim of social justice central to social work, education and research. And of course, as you know, we're all being encouraged to put more emphasis on, particularly on research in social work, and that can't be a bad thing. We have to be research-minded. We have to think in terms of evidence-based practice so that our practice is based on available evidence rather than our own whim or personal preference and so on. And the expectations of standards in the new degree include one that students and practitioners have an appreciation of relevant studies and research methods, and that we're able to evaluate practice in order to improve it. But it sometimes concerns me that notions of research-mindedness and evidence-based practice are talked about as though they are straightforward, they're uncontentious, everybody knows and agrees what they mean. And after all, if you think of it, it's no more than common sense to ensure that practice is based on knowledge, gained systematically and meticulously. But these notions aren't straightforward, and there isn't agreement about what we mean by research-mindedness. And if you talk to different groups of people within social work, if you talk to managers or practitioners or service users, all might have a different notion of what research-mindedness means and what kinds of evidence are acceptable in relation to what we understand as the evidence-based practice. So we mustn't assume that we have a common understanding of these sorts of notions. And also, the idea of social justice is not without controversy. An aim of social work internationally, which has been accepted over the past few years, is explicitly to promote human rights and social justice, and to attempt to challenge practices that violate these principles. But when it comes to social work research, are we not dealing with a different kind of animal? After all, a commitment to social justice, to human rights, is a value. It's a belief system that's not necessarily shared by people everywhere. It requires a political stance. It demands the taking of sides. Have we not been taught that these are all anathema to social research? After all, research should be value-free, not partisan, but neutral, unbiased, and objective. So we have this kind of issue immediately because research is treated as though it's something separate and different from practice. Well, the position that I take, and that a lot of people are taking, is that human activity is always inevitably influenced by particular ways of seeing the world. And research, no less than any other human activity, is always in the interests of somebody, of some social group or other. For example, managerial, government priorities are focused on urgent answers to practical problems. What will work in changing behaviour? What resources are needed? What are the costs involved? And their interests are inevitably primarily in targets, budgets, resources. They're not necessarily concerned with what caused the problem in the first place, or what the individuals or groups most affected consider to be the problem, or the impact of wider environmental factors on it. So but on the other hand, user groups might be preoccupied with what actually caused the problem, with its impact on them as individuals and families, and with what structures and provisions need to change, rather than what in terms of their own individual behaviour needs to change. This all makes research a profoundly political exercise. I'm reinforcing some of the things that Mark said about practice. Research is not simply a range of neutral approaches to the examination of universally agreed upon social problems. The questions that are asked by research are always a selection from a wider range of questions that could be asked, and they influence profoundly the direction that the research takes. So my argument then is, going back to the question of, are we not in contradiction if we say social work should be for social justice, but research should be neutral? My answer to that is that if social research and social work research is always in somebody's interests, why not the interests of the poor and the powerless? And that seems to me to be the priority. Now, I'm not arguing here that we should always, or we should never question the voices of the poor and the powerless, that they should be accepted and regarded as right, whether they're right or wrong. All our voices are partial and exclude other voices. The commitment is to investigating the ways that unjust structures impact on particular groups, resulting in unequal and marginalizing structures. So that's my first point. And you're wondering when I'm going to get to the PowerPoint. I'm sure. It's coming. The other question I want to raise for you is, what do we mean by social justice anyway? It's the same question as what do we mean by research-mindedness and what do we mean by evidence-based practice. What do we mean by social justice? Nowadays, everybody agrees that it's a good thing. And all the political parties include it as part of their policies. But it's seldom made explicit what they mean by it. And in social work, over the years, a number of writers have tackled the question of social justice. What does it mean? And sometimes it can be meaningless. What I've done here is try to draw on some of the writers to try and flag up some notions that might be included in a model of research that is aiming for social justice. And it's born out of a dissatisfaction amongst a lot of writers with the whole ethical issue about what is ethical social work research practice. And we have had produced in the last couple of years a draft of what a model of ethical social work practice might look like, which I find a bit unsatisfactory. And so I've tried to list some things that might broaden and make much more real the whole notion of ethics. To locate researchers in their organisational, in terms of their organisational political context, as well as in their own biographies, their histories, their identities, because organisational influences and priorities, as well as personal interests, determine the kinds of research questions that are asked, and inevitably exclude other questions. So the question needs to be asked, what are the organisational priorities that are influencing particular approaches to research?